What can I say? I was stunned. My wife Maggie had just made an amazing impression on me, made two big bombshells fall on me. "Mac, we need to talk," she said when I got home from work. She was still dressed in her business suit that she used to work in as an accountant. I was dressed in my work overalls in which I ran my chocolate business. "I'm Angus Mac McDougal, and my wife is Margaret Sullivan McDougal. Yes, she hyphenates her last name. Pretty pretentious, if you ask me, but whatever. Her name is Maggie. I'm of Scottish descent, and she's Irish. Of course, that should have been my first hint that we were actually incompatible, but damn. I was in love with her golden blonde hair, green eyes, and stunning body at first sight. We had met 10 years earlier when I had just been discharged from the Army and we had gone to college together. She was 18 and I was 22. I was using the GI Bill to get my culinary degree, and she, of course, was going to get the aforementioned accounting degree. For some strange reason, we hit it off. It was probably because she was a chocolate connoisseur and I wanted to make chocolates, cookies, and generally anything chocolate, come to think of it. My mom had a weakness for chocolate, as many women do. It was a seller's market where chocolate was always in high demand. While most businesses spend most of their sales at Christmas, chocolate makers can make money all year round. Christmas mostly, but also Valentine's Day, Easter, Independence Day, and so on. My little chocolate store does better business on Valentine's Day than Christmas in most years. Oh, and I hate my name. Angus. Seriously, Mom? Did you have to go and call me fucking Angus? I introduce myself as Mac to everyone. No one calls me Angus, not even my wife. Okay, Mom and Dad call me Angus, but only when they're mad at me. Any other time, I'm Mac. So Maggie just told me we need to talk. I immediately tensed up, because every guy on earth knows what those words mean when put together in a sentence. We know it, and we are afraid of it. "We need to talk" has been the harbinger of breakups and divorces since time immemorial. So with a sense of impending doom, I sat down at the table and looked at her. I knew my world was about to collapse around me. 10 years together, 8 of them had been happily married. Well, I was happily married. I thought the same thing about Maggie. I mentally went over the possible reasons for what she was about to say. Sex? No way. We had sex regularly, usually 4 or 5 times a week, and marathon sessions at that. We had a great sex life. Money? Unlikely. I was down 6 figures a year in net income, almost $250,000 after everything was taken care of with overhead, payroll for my employees, taxes, and so on. We were doing very well here. Our combined income was close to $375,000 a year. We had enough. Lack of love? Not on my part. I loved her with all my heart and soul. Did she fall out of love with me somewhere along the way? Heck, it was only a week ago we were talking about kids. She interrupted my musings by thrusting the dreaded heavy paper envelope toward me across the kitchen table as I sat down. "Maggie, please tell me this isn't what I think it is." I looked at her, and her face turned into a memorized mask that gave nothing away. "I'm sorry, Mac," she said quietly. "I should have talked to you sooner, but I want a divorce." "Why?" I asked with a lot more calmness in my voice than I felt at that moment. "It's complicated." She shivered, averting her gaze. "Have you met someone else?" I must have been shocked, since I still hadn't gone into a rage. "Yes," she said even quieter, almost a whisper. "For how long?" I asked. God, what was wrong with me? I should have been standing there seething with anger, pacing back and forth as I called her anything but the child of God. I should have threatened that asshole she traded me for. I should have felt something other than complete numbness. 8 months, she said. I closed my eyes. 8 months. I repeated. You've been cheating on me for 8 fucking months, and the first thing I hear about it is that you want a divorce. I shrugged. I guess you're going to rip me off in court. Since alienation of affection is treated unkindly here in California, I have very little recourse here. No, Mac, she said, shaking her head slowly. Your case is yours, not mine. I inherited the house from my grandparents, but I'll give you a few days to vacate it. After you find your own place, of course. For a while, I'll be pushing for minimum alimony until I remarry. Nothing that would upset the bank balance, though. I sighed. Do I know him? I finally asked. If you hurt him in any way, you'll end up in jail, she said unnecessarily. Not that I didn't want to set him up, but I didn't want to lose my business either. I know that. However, I think I have a right to know who's been bullying me for the past 8 months. I shrugged. Reginald Pennington, she said, holding her head straight. Son of a bitch. This, friends, was shock number 2. I already hated him even before this. Okay, now I was mad as hell. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to calm myself down. Reginald Dolben Pennington. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, mega-rich thanks to old money, Hitler's ideal of the master race, whatever you want to call it. Oh, and an ultra-snob with a racist bigotry a mile wide. I warned Maggie about him after we had dinner with him to discuss some of the charities we were all involved with at the time. She laughed at my warning and told me he was harmless. Yes, he was. Harmless as a fucking rattlesnake. We met him at a charity event in our community, and even then I didn't like the way he looked at Maggie. He looked at me with contempt, and at her with pure lust in his eyes. Barely containing my anger, I was finally able to look Maggie in the eye again. Well then, I guess there's not much I can do about it. I shrugged as nonchalantly as I could. I wish it hadn't come to that, Mac. She smiled sadly, which I knew was an act. She was just trying to ease my pain. However, I saw through it for what it really was. It's a lie, Maggie, I said calmly. Now my brain was working on a plan. But never mind. I'm not going to contest the divorce as long as things are as you say. You know, I'll have my lawyer go over the papers with me before I sign them. She nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less, Mac. Just so you know, this wasn't something you did or didn't do. Reginald and I just got to the soul level. I really love you, but I'm in love with him. I'm really sorry about what happened, Mac. That's bullshit. She was in love with his money. His family is worth billions. That night at the charity ball we attended, he danced a little too close to Maggie, and when they separated, I noticed he cleaned himself up after she returned to our table. I knew for a fact that he wasn't strong enough to satisfy her in bed. But since I didn't want to rock the boat just yet, I just said, I'm sorry too. Well, after that little conversation, she handed me a heavy paper envelope. You'll be formally served in the morning, Mac. I'll meet you along with my attorney at Tim's office. This is just a preview of what I want from the settlement. She means Tim Grayson, my best friend since elementary school and my lawyer in every case since I started McDougal's chocolate factory. You know what? Get rid of the alimony and be done with it. Reggie's rich. You don't want my money, do you? I knew it was unlikely, but damn it, she owed me at least that much. She seemed to think about it. Hell, if she went for it, I might not even be able to follow through with the plan that was already half-formed in my head. No, Mac, I need something out of all this. After all, I did spend 10 years of my life on you. Oh, fuck no! That statement right there, that our entire marriage, in fact, our entire time together when we were dating and engaged, was just a waste of her time, encouraged me. I looked at the proposed alimony and raised one eyebrow. She wanted alimony of $2,200 a month for 2 years, or until she remarried, whichever came first. That was about half of what I made per month after overhead and my workers' compensation. I could live on that, and I had more than enough savings in my personal savings account. I pretended to mull it over. That's great. I guess it would be worth it in the end. Finally, I shrugged my shoulders. Now I'm going to pack my things. I'm leaving tonight. And I did. I packed my suitcase and suit bag with my clothes, toiletries, and all that crap. I also packed my extensive music CD collection, which included everything from Marty Robbins to Metallica to Mozart. Yes, it covered all of those genres. Hell, I even had some Sir Mix-a-Lot in there just for laughs. I loaded it all into my bullet and went from there. I left, and less than an hour later I called Kat on her cell phone once I was on the road. Hey, Mac, what's up? Kat answered after the second beep. Kat, I just got kicked out, and I'm going to be served with divorce papers at Tim's office in the morning. Maggie is bargaining, at least in her mind. I snorted. The bitterness was finally coming through in my voice. Damn it! Are you kidding me? She seemed as shocked as I was. No, I'm staying at the Holiday Inn until I find a place to stay, I replied. Oh, hell no! Get your ass to me right now, mister. She was going to the ghetto because of me, as she put it. Fine, yes, ma'am. I grinned involuntarily. Good. I'll see you when I see you. She ended the conversation, and I couldn't help but smile and shook my head sadly. Katrina Monroe is my manager at the chocolate factory. She looks a lot like Aisha Tyler, only a little younger. Just as tall, though, 180-centimeter Nubian goddess. We all call her Cat, and she doesn't mind. Her boyfriend, Darius Jackson, plays for the Los Angeles Dodgers, which made him cool in my mind. He was now on a business trip for 8 games and will be back sometime next week. This gave me the opportunity to spend a few nights at Cat's place in her guest room before he returned. Hell, Darius was cool with me, so maybe I could stay even longer. No, I needed to find my own place. Heck, I could probably buy an inexpensive house outright with the money I had in the bank. But the 50-50 split hadn't happened yet. Damn. Yeah, I'll probably have to rent an apartment for a while before I can afford my own house again. My thoughts were interrupted when I realized I was not far from Kat's house. Her boyfriend only stayed there occasionally, but he kept insisting that Kat move in with him in Los Angeles. However, Kat wouldn't budge just yet. First, she wanted total commitment from him, like putting a ring on his finger. So I was 32 years old, still in good shape, already a millionaire, but shitting myself and being destroyed by the woman I fell in love with and married, my future ex-wife, a cheating gold-digging whore. I pulled into the driveway of Kat's house and parked right next to her little Ford Fusion. I swear to God, that little car shrank back in fear of Bullet. I smirked, giving Bullet one more shot at the engine before shutting off the big V8. As I opened the trunk and grabbed my suitcase, I saw Kat open the door and step out wearing only Daisy Dukes jeans and a tank top. It took my breath away when I saw her full breasts tight against the tank top, her long, silky legs, and her gorgeous round ass. However, I quickly put those thoughts out of my mind. I closed the trunk and walked over to her, and Kat let me in without saying a word. The look on her face was one of disbelief, struggling with several other emotions. I'm pretty sure I was still in shock at that point. Yes, I was in shock. That was the way I still perceived things. But no sooner had I stepped inside than I dropped my suitcase and collapsed to my knees. The depth of what had finally happened to my shock-fogged brain. I had held it back for as long as I could, but now it was all bursting out of my brain compartment and out of my eyes. Violent, heartbreaking sobs shook my body, tears poured down in rivers, and I felt 2 long, feminine arms wrap around my shoulders as Kat knelt down beside me. I clung to her desperately. Her presence alone kept me in this world and kept me from completely withdrawing into myself. Shh, it's okay now. You're going to be okay, Mac, she reassured me. No, I'm not. I shook my head. Yes, I was wallowing in self-pity. I freely admit that. In response, she cradled my head against her lush breasts, and in that moment I felt loved. The love of a very good friend, but at least I felt love from someone. She lifted me to my feet and we walked. Okay, she left and I stumbled into the living room and collapsed on her big leather couch. Hey, we can watch Darius play! The Dodgers are playing the Braves in Atlanta tonight! She was trying to cheer me up, and she knows how much I love baseball. I sniffed my nose like a kid. Okay, I guess it couldn't hurt. I tried to smile, but I think it looked more like a grimace. She turned on the TV, and the game was on in the 4th inning in Atlanta. The score was already 4-2 in favor of the Dodgers. It really cheered me up and took my mind off my own problems. Kat brought us both beers, and we watched the game together. Things went back and forth for a while, but we ended up winning in extra innings. By the end, we were laughing and cheering when Darius caught a fly ball to end the game and secure another great win for the Dodgers. I was taking a big sip of the local beer when suddenly Kat's laughter stopped. "You've got to be kidding me, damn it!" she exclaimed loudly, and her mouth dropped open in shock as she fixed her dagger gaze on the TV. I followed her gaze and saw Darius kissing some woman on there, And not just a friendly kiss, they were playing tonsil hockey with heat. Is there something in the water? I wondered aloud. It was all I could think of to say when I saw Kat's relationship going down the drain along with my marriage. There must be some kind of cheating drug in that damn water, she roared. I glared at her, and the fire in her dark brown eyes made me nervous. And a white woman? What a son of a bitch! He said he didn't even like white women. I listened to her argue with him for about 20 minutes. Then she looked at me and broke into her own sobs. I returned the favor by hugging her while she spewed it all out. As she cried, she looked at me with bloodshot eyes that pretty much mirrored my own. Look at us, huh? Two fucking cuckolds. She laughed sadly, and I smiled as a few random tears rolled down my face as well. Well, at least Maggie did that to me in private. I shrugged. The bastard had done it on national television. I'm so sorry, Kat. It's not your fault, honey. She hugged me tightly, then reached for her cell phone. I'm so sorry. I'll call his cheating ass and tell him what hour. No problem. I nodded as she hit the speed dial button. Hey, Darius. Uh-huh. Yeah, we saw the game. Mac came over because his cheating bitch wife is divorcing him and kicked him out. No, he's gonna stay with me for a few days. Just until he finds his own place. No, and that brings me to why I'm calling you. I saw you playing catch-up with that slut. She stopped and listened for a few seconds, rolling her eyes. She silently put her finger to her lips and put me on speaker so I could listen. I nodded understandingly. But baby, I just have. I have needs, you know that. She doesn't mean anything to me. I just need a little snack while I'm on the road. You gotta understand that. Asshole whined and sucked up. As far as I was concerned, dumbass didn't belong on the Dodgers anymore. Well, Darius, we're done now, she said with iron in her voice. I'll have the crap you left here sent back to your house in Los Angeles. I don't want to see you and I don't want to hear from you. You understand me? But baby... He shuddered, and there was desperation in his voice. Nope. You lost the right to call me baby when you sucked up to that whore on national television. I don't play that shit. We're done. C-O-N-E-C. We're done. F-I-N-E-S. Get that in your head right now. Goodbye, Darius. I hope that bitch was worth it. Before he could whine one more time, Kat ended the call and blocked his number. She looked at me and smirked sadly. Well, there you go. Zero tolerance. I nodded. Zero tolerance. I agree, Kat. Cheaters don't deserve a second chance. So what's she doing about the divorce? Don't even tell me she's going to take you to the cleaners. I swear I'm gonna blow that blonde's head off. Kat always turned me on with her euphemisms, and I caught myself smiling at this one. Oddly enough, no. She wants $2,200 a month in alimony, which is probably why I won't try to stop her from getting married as soon as possible. But otherwise, the arrangement she's proposing is very fair. I shrugged my shoulders. I had cried it all out and entered the acceptance phase of grief from the divorce. Okay, acceptance was a long way off. I wanted to make them pay, and now that I was thinking clearly, my plan was starting to take shape in my head. It would depend on a few things, like who catered their wedding, but the more I ran it through my head, the better I felt. So she must be serious about this asshole? Did she tell you who it was? Kat asked. Yes, and you're going to love it. Reginald Pennington IV. I smirked. Kat's eyes widened. Damn, I would never have mistaken Maggie for a gold digger. I wouldn't have mistaken her for one either until now. She'd obviously fooled everyone. I shrugged. Her parents never liked me, so I'm pretty sure they pushed her into it, at least a little. I was never good enough for their little darling. Okay. I have to admit I let my bitterness show for a moment. Well, screw them. Kat shrugged her shoulders. I can see the wheels turning, Mac. What are you planning? Kat could always tell when I was really thinking hard. She'd seen it often enough at work when I had to solve some problem in the store or factory. Revenge of monumental proportions. I smiled serenely as I told her about it. Just trust me on this one. It will make a lasting impression on them for the rest of their lives. Okay, I'm almost afraid to ask. What do you already have? Now Kat was giggling. I laid out my basic plan to her and she burst into heartbreaking laughter. You're just an amazing bastard, she shrieked as tears of laughter streamed down her face. Okay, we need to figure out how to do this shit. So we did. We stayed up drinking beer and thinking about our plan of action for when the wedding would take place. We calculated 3 months from now since I wasn't going to fight the divorce. They would get married 6 months after that. We would be ready, and if I could stay cordial with Maggie and, yes, even Reginald, I could probably get to the wedding without derailing it. By the time I carried my suitcase and bag into the guest room, it was well past midnight. I told Kat I'd be late at the store since I had to meet Tim in the morning to sign the divorce papers, and she understood. She said she would keep things going until I got there, or I could take the day off if I wanted. I slept surprisingly well that night. Maybe it was the beer we drank in moderation, or maybe it was the twisted and devious plan I had devised to make Reginald Penestini and Maggie's wedding a memorable event for them. Either way, I was pleased with what we had figured out. I got up early in the morning with a smile on my face. I heard scrambled eggs and bacon sizzling on the stove, and that aroma woke me up even more. She also had fresh coffee brewing, and that was even better. I couldn't remember the last time Maggie had made me breakfast, but damn it, Kat was cooking and we were just temporary roommates. I showered and dressed in a t-shirt and jeans since I didn't feel like going to the store after seeing Tim. I then joined Kat in the kitchen. Good morning, Kat, I smiled, taking a seat on the bar stool in her kitchen nook. Good morning, sunshine. She gave me a dazzling smile. You look a lot better this morning than when you came here last night. Thanks to you and the beer. I nodded in appreciation, which made me laugh musically. I had to laugh too because Kat's laughter is contagious. Well, here's some eggs and bacon for you, sweetie. Are you coming to work after you see Tim? She put a plate and a mug of coffee in front of me. Thanks, Kat. No, I think I'll take the day off. I don't know how I'll react after meeting with Maggie and her lawyer about signing the divorce. I shrugged my shoulders. But I'll tell you this. I'll take you to lunch later and tell you what happened. Kat nodded. You'd better do that, Mac. Hell, I'm glad I'm not going with you. If I saw that bitch, I'd probably have to beat the shit out of her. That's one of the reasons I love you, sweetheart. I smirked. You're the most loyal person I know. Uh-oh, I love you too, boss. She smiled sweetly as I stood up and gave me a hug. Kat is only a couple of centimeters shorter than me, so her whole body was pressed against mine as we hugged in sympathy. Hey, both of our exes cheated on us. I'm glad you're doing well too, I told her, pulling her tightly against me and then letting her go. At least they didn't cheat on each other. That would be a cliché now. She snorted with laughter and I had to chuckle at that. Totally true. But for both of us to find out on the same day, the biggest one, coincidence. I did my best comic book guy impression of her. Kat and I both love The Simpsons, so she knew right away and clapped me on the shoulder with a giggle. You're right, Mac. That's one heck of a coincidence that makes that cheater drug in the water sound even more plausible. You and your conspiracy theories? I rolled my eyes, bestowing her with a cheerful smile. Hey, the truth is out there. Kat threw me a creepy look. When we finished cleaning up and loaded her dishwasher, she handed me the key to her apartment. This was supposed to go to Darius, but I think you'll need it more than he will. She smiled. Thanks, Kat. I smiled, kissing her cheek again and hugging her tightly. Don't worry, though. I'll find a place of my own in a few days, and I'll be out of your hair. Take your time, Mac, she assured me. Trust me, honey. I'd rather have you around where I can keep an eye on you than have you alone, where God only knows what you'd do on your own. My parents went through a divorce, so I know how my dad took it when my mom left him. I'm not letting you out of my sight. Okay, Mommy. I smirked, and she clapped me on the shoulder with her own cheeky grin. I'd heard about what had happened and how her mom was mentally unstable. She hadn't cheated on Kat's dad, but there had been other issues with her personality and mental health that had led her to drink and eventually divorce him. I didn't know all the details, but it wasn't nearly as disgusting as my own situation. However, her father took it hard. As for some of the details of our relationship, Kat and I had known each other for 20 years. She's 2 years older than me, but sort of looked out for me at school when we were kids. Back then, I was shorter than all the other boys, so I was bullied a lot. Kat was already taller than most boys and girls and was on her way to Amazon status. She stood up for me and no one wanted to test her. But that wasn't the only thing she reacted to. She taught me how to stand up for myself. She taught me how to fight dirty, as my own parents would never have done. She learned early on how to take care of herself. By the time we became teenagers, I had finally grown up enough to be a couple of inches taller than her. Barely. I made my last growth spurt my sophomore year of HS, and Kat had stopped growing by then, and we've been there ever since. We've both gotten fat since our college days, but still in good shape. She was a hurdler on the track team, and I played baseball. But while Kat was good enough to get a scholarship to the University of Southern California, I wasn't good enough at baseball to earn a scholarship. So I went into the Army instead, and then used my tuition bill to go to school afterward. When I opened the chocolate store shortly before I married Maggie, Kat applied for a job as manager. She had a master's degree in business administration, so I quickly scooped her up into my arms. In our first year, I couldn't pay her very much, but once word of mouth got around, we had almost so much business that we couldn't handle it. I was able to bring in some great people to work with me, and Kat was and still is the best of them. After a year, I left her in charge to take Maggie with me on our belated honeymoon. During those 2 weeks, things ran smooth as silk for Kat, and after the first year, we were on track to pay off the bank loan, and I could even afford to give everyone a raise. By the end of the 3rd year, I had a miniature factory attached to my store with a spacious kitchen and everything. I landed a few contracts for cocoa beans, and I was able to bring in some nice exotic blends. In my 5th year, we sent out special orders for candy all over California, but I steadfastly refused to franchise or anything like that. Nevertheless, we got damn close to being a special order-only operation. I was offered millions for my company, but my staff and I refused to sell. They decided they didn't want to work for anyone but me. If I had sold the store, all my employees would have quit. That solved everything for me. I was going to keep it as a small business with my 20 employees, and we were just going to have fun and make money doing it. That, as it turned out, was the final nail in the lid of my coffin as far as my wife's in-laws were concerned. Maggie's father wanted to invest in my business and expand it. I politely but firmly dismissed him, saying I wanted to keep the business small, with a family atmosphere. He enlightened me well, saying that expansion was the only way to make serious money. I firmly and less politely pointed out that I was already making serious money but didn't want to get greedy like he was. I lazily inquired what they would think about Maggie cheating on me and then divorcing me in favor of Reginald Penis Tiny, and realized that I didn't care, but that they probably approved of it. Old money attracts old money, and the Sullivans, while not as rich as the Penningtons, were still old money. That morning after breakfast, Kat and I left the house. She left for work, and I went to visit Tim in his office. Maggie hadn't shown up yet when I got there, so we talked about this shit until she arrived. When she walked in, Tim visibly tensed up. I realized from his body language that Maggie and her lawyer weren't the only ones present. I stood up, turned around, and sure enough, it was little Dickie Pennington himself. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to wipe the smug grin off his face. Instead, I ignored his proffered handshake and looked at Maggie. "Well, let's get this over with." I shrugged. Tim discussed the proposed split and everything else. Since my business wasn't funded with her money or her family's money, and since the house was a gift from her parents after her grandparents died, they weren't community property, they were ours. My automobile, of course, was mine. I had been restoring it since middle school. Tim surprised me. "So you are divorcing my client to marry Reginald Pennington IV? Is that correct, Mrs. McDougal?" The question took her by surprise. "Well, she dodged it. Please, a simple yes or no would suffice." Tim wouldn't leave her alone. Her lawyer, a Gloria Allred wannabe, leaned over and whispered something in Maggie's ear. "Yes," she said quietly. lowering her eyes as if ashamed. Tim had never called her Mrs. McDougal. "And how soon were you planning to get married?" Tim continued. Maggie, Reggie Boy, and Gloria Jr. were now in the group. They were whispering furiously back and forth. Tim took this opportunity to lean over and whisper in my ear, "Alimony." I just nodded back and smiled. He was trying to make me not pay her a dime. As the three stooges broke the embrace, Maggie looked at Tim again. "As soon as possible after the divorce becomes final. We've already planned most of the wedding itself." Tim nodded. "And if these reports are correct..." He pulled out a detailed financial report on Reggie the Kid. "Mr. Pennington here, on his own and without the many houses and cars he owns, is solvent for almost $1 billion. My question, Mrs. McDougal, is this. Why would you want an honest, hard-working man like your husband to pay you alimony when you can simply ask Mr. Pennington for any money you wish to spend?" Maggie once again found herself embroiled in an altercation with Gloria Jr. and El Culo. Tim sent me a lightning-fast smile, and I returned the same smile while the three friends discussed their next move. When they emerged from the crowd, Gloria Jr. spoke up. "Then what would you offer as adequate compensation?" she asked, focusing her stern gaze on me. "Well, she could take all the furniture, not just her half. I don't care about that," I shrugged. Once again, huddled together, dear friends. The whispers were more muffled this time, but they finally broke off and looked at Tim. "Agreed," said the lawyer bitch. And so it went. I didn't have to pay child support, but I didn't get any furniture either. Gloria Jr. made the necessary changes to the divorce papers, which we all signed, except for the snake boy, and the filing took place the same day that feminist bitch lawyer left. As I was walking back to my car, Maggie and Reggie the Kid came up to me. "Angus, old boy, I hope you're not offended." Again, he actually extended his hand to me for a handshake. That did the trick. I took his hand and squeezed it very hard so that his face contorted with pain. "Call me Angus again, Reginald, and I'll make your life a living hell. I'm Mr. McDougal to you, understand?" By the time I finished speaking, he was on his knees, and the bones in his hand were grinding against each other. "Yes, Mr. McDougal, let me go, pal, please." There was real fear written all over his face. I let go of his arm before the gangrene set in, and he breathed a sigh of relief. "That's for calling me Angus," I said calmly. "As for the whore, no hard feelings." I smiled, turned, and walked to my car. I felt good about myself now. I had somehow stopped paying alimony and was pretty much free of her once the divorce was final. Oh, that reminds me. I got back to them as Maggie was helping Reggie the Kid to his feet. "Maggie, before I go, I need to return my grandmother's wedding ring." I held out my hand to her. Maggie looked at me like I had just fallen off another planet. Then she took off her wedding bands and held them out to me. "Thank you." I smiled, nodded at them, put the rings in my pocket, and walked back to my car. I started the powerful V8 engine and shifted it into gear, simultaneously depressing the clutch and hitting the gas. The car shrieked its tires as I taxied out of the parking lot, leaving some rubber on the pavement and some smoke in the air. It wasn't something I did often, but I wanted to send a loud and clear message to the two lovebirds. I looked in the rearview mirror, and the jerk was standing there, stunned, still gingerly clutching his right hand. I grinned happily, heading towards the store. When I got there, Kat was happy to see me, as was everyone else. They all came over and hugged me or shook my hand and told me how sorry they were. I thanked them all and told them all to get back to work. However, I said this with a smile on my face to let them know that I appreciated their efforts to help me feel better. The thing is, I was already feeling pretty darn good. Aside from the attorney fees and half the legal fees and having to give up my half of the furniture that I never really liked anyway, I'd just gotten a bloodless divorce. "Come on, Kat," I said. "Let's go to lunch." I drove us there in the Bullet, and Kat really enjoyed riding in it. She could hear the engine rumbling under the hood and feel the power emanating from it, like an aura of splendor. We ate and laughed. Two old friends shared a meal, and our friendship and the newly strengthening bonds of a recently committed love. I still can't believe I had absolutely no fucking idea she was cheating on me, I hissed at last, voicing my own helplessness when it came to being blind as far as Maggie was concerned. I must have really been stupid. No, Mac, you were in love. Love can blind us, you know that. Kat smiled and reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I smiled involuntarily. Thank you, Kat. I squeezed her hand in return, letting her know how much I appreciated everything she had done for me, professionally and personally. She was so much more than my office manager and friend. I had grown to depend on her for a long time now. First in school when I was a little kid who was smaller than everyone else. Then as a man who wanted his business to succeed and hired her as the most suitable and qualified of the group of applicants who applied. You never have to thank me, Mac. A nice bonus at the end of the year is thanks enough. She smirked, and I laughed outright at that. Consider the deed done. I smiled and looked into her dark brown eyes with my dark blue pupils. She looked away first, and I noticed a slight blush on her caramel-colored face. I told myself to stop it. She's my friend, and she too had just experienced a loss. In all the years of our friendship, I had never looked at Kat like that before. Never in my life had I seen her as anything but a friend, albeit a very beautiful friend. Of course, I had noticed the fact that she was a very well-built woman, just like last night at her house when I pulled up and she came outside to meet me. Heck, what pure-blooded American male would not notice a gorgeous Amazon like her? But that was just what we guys do. It was different. I realized I wasn't ready for that, and we quickly went back to other topics. After we finished lunch, I drove her back to the store and dropped her off there. She said she'd see me at home, so I drove up to the cliffs and looked out at the Pacific Ocean. I looked at my left hand and took off the ring that had been there for the last 8 years. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pulled out Maggie's engagement ring. I studied them both, and the mere sight of them made me sick. I then pulled out my grandmother's wedding ring and put all 3 of them together. I put my grandmother's ring back in my pocket, then reached back and threw the wedding rings into the ocean with all my might. They glistened in the sun as they flew over the cliffs and fell into the white water, crashing against the rocks below. It was symbolic to me. My marriage was broken, and it was an autopsy. Of course, the divorce was going to end on its own anyway, but it was something I had to do for my own sanity and to be able to move on. Now, just because I gave a eulogy in honor of my marriage, it didn't mean I gave up on my plan to get revenge on Maggie and Reggie the kid. I remembered a line from the song Violence and Bloodshed that went something like this. Payback's a bitch and I pay for everything. I smiled as I heard Scott Columbus playing death drums and Eric Adams singing the lyrics, while Joey DeMaio recorded the bass part and Ross Boss played lead guitar. Oh yeah, Reggie was going to pay for stealing my wife, and my wife was going to pay for being a gold-digging whore. Some would call me vindictive and a caveman, those to whom I'd just say, screw you. Do a 30-kilometer road march in my boots and then judge me. 3 months later, everything was settled. The joint accounts were split 50-50ths. During this time, Kat and I coexisted as roommates and got along great. No one at work cared that we were living together. It was a huge surprise when we came home one evening and found wedding invitations in the mail. Maggie wasn't kidding. They had scheduled the wedding a month after the official divorce decree. I smiled at Kat, and she smiled back. Okay, now it's time for action, I said angrily as I drove us to Costco. Finding a caterer for the wedding wasn't hard. He had wanted to do business with us a few months ago, but it hadn't worked out. I decided to, give him another chance, and take care of it myself this time. What made me laugh very hard was that Maggie was going to wear white, just like Reggie the kid in his navy blue suit. He was a naval aviator in the early days of the war, and while I was on Captain Drake's Alpha team, it seemed he couldn't even wear a plain black tuxedo. A few days before the wedding, I paid a visit to the caterer and replaced the chocolate cake mix with my own special blend. I grinned like a Cheshire cat, replacing the cake mix with something else chocolate-flavored. No, it wasn't poison. It was just something that would make Maggie and Reggie baby's wedding pretty damn unforgettable for everyone involved. Now, what I was doing was like a high school prank, only done with a lot more style. But damn it, I had to get something back. They hornswoggled me for 8 months before upsetting me with divorce papers. Of course, she was very amicable in the divorce, and I was only left with a broken heart. However, that heartbreak would cost them dearly. I kept Kat in the loop, and she laughed out loud when I told her that Operation Mudslide was a success. The invitation included a reception where the real fun was to begin. On the morning of the wedding day, Kat and I showered at the same time. And no, we did not shower together. We had grown closer over the past few months, though. However, we were still shy about the relationship, and I, for one, was worried that I would ruin our friendship by taking it to the next level. I'm just glad she installed those tankless water heaters. After changing into my Armani suit, I waited in the living room until Kat was ready. "Well, am I presentable?" she asked as I watched the UCLA soccer game. I turned to look at her and my jaw dropped to the floor. A vision of beauty appeared before me that would be hard to describe, but I'm going to try anyway. Kat was wearing an emerald green dress that fit her curves like a glove. The shimmering material flattered her as if she was in love with her body and didn't want to part with it. Her hair was styled in a shoulder-length style that framed her beautiful face perfectly. Her full, luscious lips were painted a sultry red color, and her green eyeshadow complemented her dress perfectly. She was wearing slipper shoes that made her exactly the same height as me. Her taut calves were on display, and the shoes emphasized them perfectly. Her lush bust barely covered the top of her dress, and when she turned around, I caught a glimpse of her caramel-colored back. "Oh my goodness gracious, you look amazing," I said, when I could finally get the words out. She smiled a perfect smile. "Thanks, Mac. You look pretty damn good yourself." I blushed at those words. "Thanks, Kat," I said as we headed for the door. We drove to the church. Ironically, Billy Idol's White Wedding was playing on the radio. As Bullet pulled into the parking lot, people turned around and stared at the big V8 heralding our arrival. Every guest there except us was high society with old money. Okay, this promised to be even more fun than I expected. We showed our invitations to the bouncer at the door. Okay, bouncer might be too generous a definition. He looked like one of Reggie the Kid's security thugs who used to accompany him to social events. It seems the Penningtons had made a few enemies over the years with their business practices, thus making unnecessary checks. This did not surprise me in the least. Reggie the Kid's family adheres to the kill others before they kill you school of thought. Their version of the golden rule. Or it could be, he who has the gold makes the rules. And the scornful looks Kat and I were getting from the snobby elite made me feel even better about what was to come on this beautiful day. As we took our seats in the pews, I leaned over to Kat and whispered in her ear, "Remember not to eat anything chocolate at the reception." To this she giggled softly and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. The service was long and boring. A typical Catholic wedding. I had to fight myself a few times to stay awake, but whatever. Reggie admittedly looked amazing in his Navy uniform. Another reason to hate that shit. He'd been a naval officer before retiring to go into business with his family. His Annapolis class ring sparkled as he waited for Maggie to walk down the aisle. Then the wedding march played, and there she was, with her snooty dad by her side. I remembered our wedding, and the way he'd been frowning at me the whole time. Now, however, he was glowing with pride that his darling little girl was finally marrying a man of his stature. I wanted to punch the asshole in the face, but refrained. Everything would be fully paid for later. And so it came to pass. I won't bore you with the mundane details of the wedding vows, which she didn't take seriously the first time around, or the ring exchange, which she shit on because of her affair with this asshole, or anything else for that matter. Then I got an Oscar for Best Actor, an Emmy, a Tony, and a Golden Globe all at the same time when I congratulated them both when we went to the reception. Kat would win Best Actress because she took Maggie's betrayal of me as a betrayal of everyone who worked for me and also loved her like a sister. Reggie poked me in the face again. "Angus, old boy, I hope you're really not offended." In the end, the one who was better won. It took all my self-control not to stomp him into the ground, not to break his testicles, elbows, knees, or make his plastic surgeon a very rich man with a complete facial reconstruction. Instead, I said, "You're right. The one who was better won." Whereupon I grabbed a slightly surprised Kat and kissed her as hard as I could. Kat stiffened for a moment, then responded enthusiastically to my kiss. Right there, in front of Reggie and Maggie, I captured Kat with my lips and tongue. That first kiss was amazing. Everything around us disappeared for a moment as our tongues dueled, then slowly danced and her arms wrapped around my neck and her fingers ran through my hair. When we broke the kiss, Kat looked at Reggie and Maggie. Yes, he had really won. She winked and left the happy couple standing there with their mouths open. We exchanged grins as we took our assigned seats and had some lobster for dinner. It was actually pretty darn tasty. Then it was time for the real entertainment when the wedding cake was rolled out. Reggie and Maggie ceremoniously cut the cake, with the ceremony cake being made personally for both of them. Everyone laughed and people came up to take a piece of cake for themselves. We decided to wait for the end of the line, as it was going to be one heck of a spectacular show. Of course, once we got to the cake itself, all fucking hell broke loose. Of all people, it started with the bride farting, and not just any soft fart. It was followed by a deafening fart from the groom himself. I looked in their direction and said loudly, "You stink," which elicited a few chuckles from the snobby elite around me. Oh, but they were not about to be spared. A surprised expression then appeared on Maggie's face as a gurgling sound came out of her, quickly followed by an expression of genuine horror. Reginald's face crinkled as he smelled some foul odor and then made his own gurgling sound from his ass. They looked at each other in horror as the other guests started farting again. Maggie and Reggie Baby jumped up and ran as fast as they could, and I saw brown liquid dripping onto the floor from under her dress, and behind her, Reggie trying to hide the spreading brown stain on the ass of his white pants. Both of them rushed to the toilets like crazy, and were soon followed by the other guests when they realized they had just shit themselves. Kat and I left quickly, quietly, and sat in the bullet when we could no longer contain our laughter. We both had tears running down our faces as we damn near burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Mac!" Kat laughed, then grabbed her stomach and laughed. I laughed as hard as she did. "Do you think I used too much?" I said between fits of tear-filled laughter. "How fast does this shit work?" She laughed again. "Well, the Costco boxes said it works well, but you shouldn't use too much." I giggled when our laughter finally subsided a bit. "How many boxes did you pour into the cake mix?" she asked incredulously. "I replaced all of them." I smiled serenely, making Kat almost die laughing again. I used a powdered chocolate-flavored laxative and poured it into the boxes of cake mix that the caterers had stocked for the Penningtons' wedding. The cake and cupcakes were almost pure laxative, as I threw away most of the cake mix boxes and replaced them with powdered laxative. I also added some to the regular cake mix so it wouldn't be too strong. But holy crap! I didn't expect it to work that fast. It was just the icing on the cake. Ha ha! That evening, I went to the caterer ostensibly to contract with him for chocolate produced by my factory. He had contacted me months before, and I promised to call him back. I told him that we had some delays due to a few of my team members being sick, but once we were up and running again, I was able to take him some samples. He had a greedy look in his eyes when he thought I was going to give him what he wanted. When he gave me a tour of the place, he showed me the kitchen and even pointed out that they had catered the Penningtons' wedding. I already knew, of course, but what he didn't know was that the bride was my gold-digging, cheating ex-wife. I behaved myself, and then as soon as he told his men to call it a day, he went back to his office, shaking my hand. He said he would draw up the paperwork for the contract and let me and Tim know when it was ready. However, I think he must have completely forgotten about the contract in the days following the wedding itself. Once everyone had dispersed and I left his office, I headed to the back door to the kitchen, opened it ajar, then drove around in my car. I replaced the chocolate cake powder with chocolate laxative and left. I made sure the door to the kitchen was bolted shut and made sure I hadn't left any boxes I'd brought with me there. One thing Captain Drake taught us back when I was in the service was to never leave a trace. He's a good guy. Last I heard, He resigned and is now a history professor at UCLA. By the day of the wedding, all evidence was gone. Nothing could tie me to super slushy cake. Only Kat and I knew about the plan, and she kept quiet. When Kat and I got back to my apartment, she looked at me seriously. "Mac, that kiss earlier," she shuddered. "Kat, I know I was out of line, but you look so beautiful and I couldn't help it." I blurted out. She put a finger to my lips. "Let me finish, baby," she said. "That kiss from earlier was the best damn kiss I've ever had. You're a good man and a damn good one for a white boy. What I'm trying to say is that I think we'd be good together." She blushed slightly, and I leaned in and kissed her slowly. Our lips made contact. We kissed lovingly and tenderly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something so good for so long. When our lips finally parted, we looked into each other's eyes. "I think we'd be good together, too. There's only one way to find out." I smiled, and she smiled back. Once inside, we kissed slowly again. I pulled the straps of her dress down off her shoulders and kissed her. I broke all land speed records by stripping naked and making her strip with me. Her hands stroked my back and neck as our bodies made contact. The touch of her skin against mine was electrifying, and I kissed her hard and passionately again, laying her down on the bed. She lovingly ran her hand over my cheek and gave me a satisfied smile. "Wow, Mac, what the hell was that bitch thinking?" "You mean you didn't see the dollar signs in her eyes as she walked down the aisle?" I smirked. "Kat, I'm not as rich as the Penningtons or Reginald baby in particular, but trust me when I say that I will never leave you bored in bed." "Baby." She laughed long and loud. "You mean Mr. Brown Pants?" "Yeah, they should probably legally change their last name now," I agreed, chuckling. As we recovered from another fit of laughter, I pulled Kat to me and kissed her again. This time we made love long and slow. Neither of us was in a hurry to finish like the first time. It was born of lust and need. This time was born of love and tenderness. Kat had never been made love to before. She would later tell me that all the guys she had been with just wanted to have fun and didn't really care about her needs. I sought to change that, and I succeeded. We spent the rest of the day and night in bed together. We showered together and then plopped on the bed in a 69 position. Now, some might ask why I had set the caterer up like that. The problem was that Sal, the owner, had been pestering Kat when she first got there to negotiate with him, back when he first expressed interest in doing business with us. After giving Sal a slap on the wrist when he got too excited, she came back and said we shouldn't do business with him. What changed was that they were announced as the organizers of the Pennington wedding, and I saw an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. The aftermath of the asshole wedding, as the press put it, was instantaneous. The news channels and newspapers showed it the next day, and there was great footage and video of the bride, groom, and guests running to the restrooms from the dining room. I invited all the guys and girls from the store at Kat's house to watch the celebration. None of the scenes there showed us, but everyone knew we were there. We all laughed so hard we even cried when the snobby elite ran to the bathroom like their asses were bursting. Needless to say, many of the arrogant snobs were completely baffled by the shots of them struggling to keep the brown liquid from stinking up the room too much. The only people I felt sorry for were the cleaners who had to clean up the mess afterward. Of course, about a week after the wedding fiasco, the cops showed up and started asking questions. Kat and I attended the wedding, but we both said we left when the damn storm happened. Ha ha, because we were worried about our own health. We kept nonchalant faces during our interviews and died laughing only after the detectives left. We never heard from them again. Reggie the kid sued the caterer, but Sal the caterer fled the country rather than pay compensation. Last we heard, he left for Italy, where he was from. Not sure what happened to him after that. Reginald Pennington IV was caught in bed with another man's wife less than a year after their marriage. Who caught him? Her husband, and he wasn't very nice to Reggie the kid. He called Maggie, and she had some appropriate words for Reggie when she got to the abusive hubby's house. Shortly thereafter, Maggie showed up on the doorstep of our new home. At least Reginald ended up losing a testicle in the ensuing melee. She herself seemed to have no problem with cheating at the time. She absolutely would not have tolerated her hubby cheating on her. Kind of a double standard, don't you think? Yes, Kat and I moved into a bigger apartment because her little one-bedroom apartment wasn't big enough. Our new ranch-style dwelling was 4 bedrooms, and by the end of the first year, I had half bought it out. Apparently, Reggie the kid made Maggie sign a prenup that said if she filed for divorce for any reason, she would walk away with nothing but what she brought to the marriage. She still had a $125,000 a year job, but that was it. No billions for Maggie Sullivan. It was the end of the next year when we heard a knock on the door. Kat was 4 months pregnant, so I gave her a quick kiss and jumped up to answer the door myself. I opened the door to a crying Maggie. "What do you want, Maggie?" I asked in a neutral tone. "I'm sorry, Mac. I'm sorry for everything," she sobbed. "Hey, you were the one who wanted to switch," I shrugged. "What happened?" "I caught Reginald cheating on me," she admitted, sobbing even harder. "Wow, that's a cool twist," I said sarcastically. "And, Mac, I'm really sorry. I was wondering if there was any chance of—" She cut herself short when she saw a pregnant Kat coming out from behind me. "Baby, who's that?" I heard Kat's question as she approached me. She smiled at Maggie. "It's Maggie, and she was just about to leave," I said, slamming the door in my ex's face. I slid the deadbolt shut and wrapped Kat in a hug. "She's the past. You're my future. I love you, sweetheart." "Oh, I love you too, baby," she said, kissing me. Kat and I got married shortly after we found out she was pregnant. A small civil ceremony that was her idea, and we became husband and wife. She is still my manager at the store, and she is still one of my best friends. I love my wife.